In the Championship, Wilder brews up a Sheffield Derby double. Bogle saves a Leeds bungle in Shepherd's Bush. Burnley push on, officially the cleanest sheets in second-tier history, whereas Argyle wet the bed in a relegation six-pointer as Derby count the wins. 3 in a row. Cov back to winning ways. Hadji with a lovely chippo to grab a hat-trick versus Sunderland. In League One, Sam Smith does something unholy to Wickham. Wrexham flexing in the second-place reckoning. Worthington worth a go for Huddersfield. Makama the gas disarmer for Lincoln, while Stockport and Charlton hurtle on. And has the relegation battle officially gone for a Burton? Only the Brewers can decide. In League Two, holy cowley, the only way is up in Essex. Coal you into the playoff spots. The top 5 all stumble down except for Wimbledon. And Tranmere are no mere mortals raining on the Valley Parade. This is Not the Top 20 podcast, where we are bang at it with just 7 weeks to go in the EFL regular season. I'm Andy Maxwell. He's George Elek. You all right?
Was that a Youssef Cheapo reference?
That's why we are mates. That's why we do this, because we loved World Cup 1998 and it has impacted us for the rest of our lives. / late 90s, early 2000s Premier League.
I'd say that's more my, basically Merlin sticker books. Youssef Cheapo, what a man. What a team. What a Coventry team that was.
But the Cheapo reference coming because of Hadji.
Hadji, right? It's cheap.
Well, but also Mustafa Hadji played for Coventry with Youssef Cheapo.
Ah, my goodness. It works on so many levels.
And layers and layers.
Do you know who Coventry signed Youssef Cheapo off?
I don't know.
This has just surprised me in the second that I've looked it up.
I'm going to guess Compostela or Salamanca.
FC Porto.
Oh,
what
baller.
A signing for Cov that was.
In the Championship over the weekend, let's start in a special footballing city with a special derby, a full-blooded derby as it was on Sunday between Sheffield Wednesday and Sheffield United, a game that started with a strong Sheffield Wednesday spell and then had a strong Sheffield United spell, but 0-0 at half-time. After half-time, another Sheffield Wednesday spell, but then 1-0. Sheffield United, Rhian Brewster wins it in front of the Kop at Hillsborough. A lovely goal it was as well. Sidney Peck with a little roulette in the build-up and a slipped ball for Tyrese Campbell, and then a shimmy from Campbell to get past Ihikwe to the byline. His cross deflected across for a tap-in for Brewster, who has very famously had a tough time with injuries, a tough time with form in front of goal. Dan Story wrote brilliantly about this earlier in the season. This is just his 3rd goal this season in 29 games, but with it, he writes himself into Sheffield United folklore as the guy who scored the goal that won them the double for the first time since 2006. And overall, George, I just think that football's a simple game, really. 22 players chase a ball for 90 minutes, and at the end, Sheffield United win by 1 goal.
Yeah, stick your data, whoever you want to stick your data, as Chris Wilder said in his post-match interview. I have no idea what that means. I don't know who he was talking to. It suggests to me that he's very aware of the fact that Sheffield United aren't projecting that well in terms of the underlying numbers. But it doesn't matter, as he would say, because they keep finding ways to win football matches. And this was another example of that. It was a relatively tight game. It was a game where Sheffield United conceded a few opportunities. It was a game where Sheffield Wednesday had 2 significant periods of the game where they were very much on top. They came at the beginning of both halves, and the goal itself came at a time where Wednesday were in the ascendancy, and it was the first effort that Sheffield United had managed to create in the whole of the second half. If there are any Sheffield Wednesday fans who haven't skipped this and are listening to this pod, I'd be surprised. But I think it has to be said, and they would disagree, but the Rhian Brewster story is a good one. This is a guy who, as a teenager, had a big reputation at Liverpool, obviously scored the goal that won, was it the Under-17s World Cup? And kind of burst onto the scene in doing so, and had, he was a player that it's often forgotten. I think there's almost this perception of Brewster as being someone who's always struggled in men's football, but he was so good as a teenager at Swansea in his first loan spell. And it's not very often that players are as good as he was in their first loan spell at Championship level. But he proved then that he is very much a striker capable of having a massive impact in the Championship, and probably higher than that. As you say, injury and a loss of form and confidence has meant that he's had some really dark days, and the massive price that Sheffield United paid for him has turned out to make it even more difficult for him to escape out of the shadow of that price tag, which has, I think further impacted the way that he's treated and the way that he's spoken about. So even though he was the match winner, he did very little in order, apart from putting the ball in the back of an empty net. It was a proper case of the right time and the right place, rather than it being any moment of individual brilliance. But for him to be able to enjoy being the person that scores the goal, not only to do the double over your rivals, but also just such a massive goal, fully in the knowledge that Burnley, who were just 2 points behind them prior to the weekend, had won, fully in the knowledge that Leeds, who were just 2 points ahead of them prior to the weekend, had drawn the day before. This is a huge goal in terms of Sheffield United's promotion credentials, but also their attempt to try and win the title in the Championship this season. And I'm delighted that he got to enjoy that, because there's no denying that he's had to do a bit of soul searching quite a few times for quite a few different reasons in what is still a very young career.
And Wilder, with quotes galore after this one, he is an absolute maestro right now, just conducting everything so perfectly and making sure he is on top of every single narrative whenever there's a mic under his nose. And I'm loving it, to be honest. It's an incredible 16-minute interview on club channels after this one. He was taking shots at all sorts, direct and indirect. Speaking of which, he referenced that their manager, I guess talking about Danny Röhl, has come out and said, we're a direct side. I loved this. He said, there's 3 ways to win a game of football: over, through and around. We've got Gus Harmer, Callum O'Hare, Rhian Brewster, Jezrak Saki, Ben Britt and Diaz. If they press, we go over the press. If they're compact, we'll go round. And if they open up, we'll try and go through. 3 ways. It's not about me or what I want to do to make me look good. I know how to win games of football. My team knows how to win games of football. We've won the most games of football in the division. Very, very true. Wednesday had their chances, particularly Windass and Ingleson, but Michael Cooper in the Sheffield United net, absolutely imperious once again, just seems to keep getting better. Even when you think he probably can't get much better, he seems to. And that means that Wednesday haven't scored in a Sheffield derby in the last 5, which is really painful. It also means that of Sheffield United's 38 league games this season, 10 of them have ended 1-0 to Sheffield United. In terms of the title race, it's the same situation as last week, really, because although Leeds drew over the weekend and Burnley and Sheffield United won, it was the reverse in midweek, where Leeds won and Burnley and Sheffield United both drew. So we are still, as we were last Monday, with Sheffield United level on points with Leeds with an inferior goal difference, and then Burnley 2 points back from that. Burnley went to Swansea and won 2-0, George, and I can't help but be quite impressed with what I'm seeing over the last month or so from this Burnley side. We know about the clean sheets, but going forward as well.
This is the best Burnley have been this season by miles. I think you and I have spoken quite a lot over the last season and at times kind of poured cold water over their runs of form, have been frustrated with their attacking output, at times even doubted the sustainability of their defensive numbers. But right now, Burnley are a side that restrict the opposition to very little and carry a massive attacking threat. And that was the case here against a Swansea side who'd improved after the sacking of Luke Williams under Alan Sheehan's guidance. And often, especially in away games, even when it's a team who are the favourites to win it, go ahead within 4 minutes, you can expect the game state to therefore turn massively. And even if the away team go on to win the game, it can often be the case, especially where a team like Swansea, where they concede loads of territory, they attack in transition and they pick off teams as they pour forward. But despite going ahead with the first shot of the game, which was a very well worked goal, Jay Dante winning the ball on the left hand side, playing in Fleming, who squared it for Brownhill, they just kept the foot on the gas and they were just the better team throughout the whole game. Anthony scoring the second goal after 22 minutes. Swansea didn't have a shot until the 40th minute. Swansea couldn't get a foothold in the game throughout, despite having quite a lot of ball in deep areas. Burnley's press was really effective. They moved the ball quickly and directly towards goal when in possession, creating decent goal scoring opportunities. This was a Burnley side just totally suffocating their hosts, really, and strangling the quality that they have. And with relative ease, getting ahead in the game and then defending that lead. I feel like Burnley are going to have games between now and the end of the season where they concede more chances and they concede goals. But finally, we're seeing a side that are consistently, they're still posting those really good defensive numbers, but are now carrying a big attacking threat. In part, I think, because, in having Marcus Edwards on the right-hand side and Jay Dante on the left, it feels like here, Swansea did quite a lot to try and stop or to prevent Edwards from having a massive impact on the right-hand side, and that just enabled Anthony to be the key attacking player here. So, yes, I think, right now in the top three, who's playing the best? I've always been a big, and I still believe that Leeds are the best team in the league, but Burnley are the team who seem to be, the results and the performances are both very, very strong.
Brownhill has scored a number of goals this season. Only 5 have scored more non-penalty goals than Josh Brownhill. And with this, Burnley set the record, I should say, for most clean sheets in a single tier, in a single second tier season. Still 8 games to go. The overall record is Port Vale's from 1953-54 in the Division 3 North with 30. So still 3 more for Burnley to get to equal that. But they are, George, 25 games unbeaten, Burnley. They have lost only 2 of their 38 league games this season, and they are 3rd in the table, which I think just sums up what a treat we're having served up to us by this top 3. Leeds are still at the top of the table. They fought back from 2-0 down to draw 2-2 at Loftus Road, where they fell famously last season. Really, really fell apart. They didn't do that here, even at 2-0 down, with QPR scoring their first 2 shots, Saito making the most of a loose pass from Aronson and smashing home a great curling shot, and then Steve Cook with a magnificent header into the corner, unattended around 12 yards out. 2 shots, 2-0 up, but Leeds didn't fall apart here. They didn't wobble. They came back into the game, and their fullbacks, again, are doing so much going forward. Firpo with the first goal, Bogle with the second goal. I mean, quite apt, really, that they are scoring so much at the moment, because I genuinely think they are the most attacking fullbacks I think I've ever seen at this level in a back 4. We've seen really attacking wing-backs previously, but I think with a team that is playing a back 4, I don't think I've ever seen fullbacks with as much license to attack, and not just attack as in stretch the play, add width, get to the byline, but like coming inside, attacking the box. In Firpo's case, he's one of the most dangerous penalty box attackers right now, given how dangerous he is from cutbacks and from crosses over the last month or so. And look, they didn't go on and win it after they made it 2-2. They actually looked a bit wobbly from set pieces throughout, and QPR almost went back ahead there. Saito saw red at the end for a naughty one. And, from a Leeds point of view, I'd be interested in the fans' mentality here, because, they're not averse to getting worried when points are dropped and others pick up wins. But, I would suggest that this was quite a strong reaction to a difficult situation, i.e. being 2-0 down, having conceded 2 shots and 2 goals. And they stood up to it and they came back and got a point. So for me, I'd be taking the positives. I don't know if that's how anyone else sees it, but they have got this strange record in London where they've won just 5 of their last 43 league games in London, with 30 defeats and 8 draws from 43. It's difficult place to go, London. That sounds like something from sort of medieval battle times. Big story down the bottom, Argyle and Derby. Whatever the result of this game, it was going to be a big story. The fact that it was 3-2 to Derby, a game where they went 2-0 up, got pegged back to 2-2, and then nicked it at the end through Marcus Harness, means this is just massive all-round. Derby have won 3 in a row, and I can't help but notice that set pieces and starting fast has been a big factor of that. Here, it was long throws, basically. The first one, Nat Phillips wins the flick on in front of 2 or 3 Argyle defenders, and there's Marcus Harness to fire in. The second one, Matt Clark's attacking the long throw from the other side. They've got big centre-backs, Phillips and Clark, attacking them. They've got Harness and Yates sniffing around the bits and pieces around the 6-yard box. And then they've got midfielders locking off the box, waiting for kind of half clearances. That was the second goal. Harrison Armstrong, the youngster, with a beautiful side-footed volley into the corner. So 2 goals early in the game again. 2 goals with their first 2 shots. Against Coventry in midweek, it was their 2nd and 4th shot that they scored with. Against Blackburn last weekend, it was the 2nd and 5th shot that they've scored with. So Eustace is being, yes, he is setting the team up well. He's clearly gone for beef at the back with Phillips and Clark, legs in midfield with Adams and Thompson, Harness and Yates up front. But he's getting the output from his attacking players to start the game, and it's giving them such a good platform to pick up points. Having said that, they did chuck away that lead. Bundu with a magnificent free kick from out wide, and then an own goal, having them level, and then Marcus Harness wins it. What a performance he's put in over the last couple of games. Nice give and go, out wide to Elder, cut back, and there was Harness streaking into the box to finish. So just a massive win. Derby's 3rd in a row. It makes it look like they are significantly more likely to stay up than Argyle, which, just 10 days ago, we wouldn't necessarily have said. If you look at betting odds, before these 3 wins, Derby had a implied probability of around 75% to be relegated, fans probably would have felt it was more likely than that. And now it's just 40%. The bookies reckon more likely Derby stay up than go down. Whereas, George, for Argyle, the prognosis is not pretty at all.
No. It's too early, as Derby have shown, to rule out any of these teams. And it does feel like Argyle's surprising win in midweek away at Pompey has just about kept them in it. But it's looking pretty terminal for Argyle, you have to say. Because, in part, it's because there's a 6-point gap to Cardiff, but there's also the fact that Luton and Derby sit between them. So not only is there a 6-point gap to cover, but you've also got to overtake three sides in order to escape. And it just feels relatively unlikely to me, especially because their home form seems to have dipped, which is where they've been so successful for the most part, albeit, away wins such as the one at Portsmouth do help. For Derby, it's, obviously the 3 consecutive wins is huge. Whether or not they're able to maintain that, we'll have to see. I've got a stake in this. I am living this relegation battle at the moment due to Oxford's participation in it, and it feels to me like this international break is coming at a bad time for the likes of Derby and maybe Cardiff, and a good time for the likes of Stoke and Oxford. Because for Derby, they just want to keep playing games now. Like you saw the scenes in front of the away end after Marcus Arnold scored the winner at Home Park. They'd wanted to go out and play 2 hours later. Like, they've got to just keep this incredible winning feeling going, and to have a 2-week or an enforced 2-week break now is not ideal in that respect. I'm sure Derby fans will think I'm clutching at straws when I say that, but it's just it's going to be tough to maintain it, or to maintain this kind of level. And that, in the same way that I've consistently been saying, because a team is winless in 9 doesn't mean they're going to be winless in the next 9. Just because Derby have won 3 in a row doesn't necessarily mean they're going to continue to win games. But John Eustace has done an incredible job to sort them out, really, and it took him a while to do so. But as is often the case, as Blackburn are finding now, and as we saw last season with Birmingham and Blackburn, teams who lose John Eustace tend to regret it, and teams who hire John Eustace tend to improve.
Yeah, it's a nice way of putting it. Blackburn, 3 defeats in a row. The latest, probably the most painful, losing at home to Cardiff by 2-1. They lost to Stoke and Derby as well in their previous game. So just losing to a lot of the bottom teams at the moment. Terrible start to the Val Ishmael era, and the playoffs looking pretty much out of reach now for a team in this form, 5 points away. But Cardiff's the story, really, because in midweek they lost at home to Luton and everything felt disastrous and almost terminal. And with this, they make up the difference again with a great win, and a deserved win as well. Only their second away win all season, Cardiff, but I believe they deserve this game, and I think that's borne out by the fact that having gone 2-1 up, having had their initial lead cancelled out, they saw it out with surprising ease, I would say. It's not to say Rovers didn't have opportunities, but it certainly wasn't the Alamo at the end there. And the goals were just 3 good crosses and 3 good headers, which I always love to see. Mansverk to Salek for the first one. 2 Cardiff January additions combining well, and Salek just looks like one of the most dangerous strikers in the league at the moment, which isn't saying that much because there aren't that many goal-scoring strikers in the league at the moment. But Salek, particularly when it comes to attacking crosses, just looks an almighty handful. Emmanuel Dennis crossed for Ohashi to equalise, and then Will Alves crossed for Mete to win it for Cardiff. So this is one of those wins that kind of, you check it out, you watch the game, you look at the stats, you're impressed, and then I just get a flash of annoyance, George, with Cardiff, because it's like there's no consistency to you at all. Like, I see performances like this, I think, why can't you do this more often? And I know that the reality is that they won't keep this up, or will they? That's the gauntlet being laid down for Cardiff, but a huge win for them, and another for Oxford United, who really needed this 1-0 win against Watford, George. It seemed to me, having not watched the game live, as I'm sure you did, that you just kind of traded chances, and then there was a red card, and then there was a goal that won it from Sir Ricky.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably an unpopular thing to say with Oxford fans, but I would say there was very little better in this performance compared to recent Oxford performances, which haven't yielded results. I think the key thing, if you look at Oxford's form since the results, well, basically since Guy Rowett came in, Rowett came in, and then we went on this incredible run. Since the first defeat, that unbeaten run ended, which was a defeat 1-0 against Burnley, The results have been 1-0 at Burnley, 0-0 against Derby, 2-0 against Pompey, 2-0 against West Brom, 3-2 against Coventry, 1-1 Norwich, 2-1 Hull, 1-0 Watford. So only 2 games have been decided by more than a solitary goal. The first one was against Pompey. Portsmouth scored at basically the last attack of the game when Oxford committed loads of men forward. And then the 2-0 against West Brom, where John Swift scored in the last second because Jamie Cumming had come up for a corner. So basically every single game is decided by a goal, or Oxford are within a goal going into injury time. And that, to me, is why I wasn't or haven't been overly concerned about the run of defeats, because naturally if you're in games that are this close, that are this tight, you will eventually end up picking up wins, picking up points, which is kind of what I alluded to on the betting show on Thursday when putting Oxford up to win this game. And this was exactly that. It was another game where Watford had quite a few chances, but nothing that clear-cut. Sissoko had one-on-one, which Cumming did well to smother. Oxford created maybe better chances, but fewer chances. Ben Nelson headed over the bar with a free header from 6 or 7 yards out. Dembele kind of skewed one into the side netting in the back post, but Watford having better volume or higher volume, and Oxford having better quality. The red card was significant here with a Banquer. I think the first yellow was incredibly harsh. It looks like Plaheta's quite naughty and kind of maybe slightly deliberately walks on a Banquer's hand after a foul, and he reacts quite angrily about that, as you would. It's another, I've spoken about this a lot. I always think that if it's reactionary, you could probably cut the defender a bit of slack, but both players get booked. But the second, the foul for the second yellow card is really stupid when you're on a yellow, where he just quite clearly gets a bit of Plaheta's shirt and gives the referee a decision to make, albeit, and again, important to say this, Plaheta was very lucky not to be sent off because he waved an imaginary yellow card for about 10 seconds after the offence. I'm not entirely sure how the referee didn't see it and give him a second yellow too. But that was a turning point in the game, and from then Oxford kind of managed it very well. The goal came from Dembele picking up a loose ball after Mark Harris, with a brilliant touch from a long ball over the top, was then fouled. It would have been interesting to see what the referee had given had that been the advantage not been played, given that Harris was likely through and was clearly taken out. But Dembele, that's his first goal for Oxford, having broken the transfer record last summer, yet to get an assist as well. He's shown flashes of what he can do, but isn't really short on confidence. It's funny, Birmingham fans warning Oxford that he was a luxury player who, would do stuff from an attacking perspective, but cost you out of possession. Whereas for Oxford, he's worked incredibly hard, but struggled for quality on the ball. But this was a moment where we're used to seeing him do this, kind of shimmying onto his right foot and firing it into the far corner to get the decisive goal. And Oxford saw the game out pretty well, albeit again, helped by playing against 10 men. So a really significant result for Oxford. As I said, I don't think it was then necessarily turning a corner or a massive improvement in terms of performance level, but definitely 2 weeks off now. Certain players such as Greg Lee, a left back, and others coming back to full fitness will be important too. I think getting a win and keeping the others, keeping that gap there before the international break, and tricky trip to Middlesbrough coming up after the break.
Shows what how much this relegation battle is just sort of messing with the mind of about 8 or 9 fan bases. That with this win, Oxford 42 points from 38 games, 1.11 PPGs. It's fairly decent return, to be honest, but that would put you on 50, 51 points in a full season. It still doesn't feel that comfy yet. There was a game that had an impact playoff level and down at the bottom. West Brom 1, Hull 1. Baggy's doing all the hard work here, huffing and puffing and having the better of the game, and then getting ahead with a really precise volley from Price, and then just throwing it away. Abu Kamara really brave to equalise, putting himself in a situation where could have got a big whack and finishing from close range. Header back across from Casey Palmer, adding something to his game I've not seen. And then, Hull almost won it. Wildsmith having to make a great double save to save a point for West Brom. So I'm looking at them and I still just don't really know whether they are the team that's going to make the playoff spot their own, or whether they are kind of vulnerable and there to be shot at. Since Mowbray took charge, 4 wins, 4 draws, 3 defeats, 1.45 points per game. It's probably not going to do it if that's the level of return that they get over the next 9 or 8 games. But again, they were impressive at Leeds. They were impressive at Burnley. They've got a really good performance in them. And then here at Hull, kind of chucking away 2 extra points that they should have got here. So, either way, that they're an interesting team to watch for the next few weeks, because they've got, after the international break, Norwich away, then Sunderland at home, then Bristol City away, then Watford at home, then Coventry away. So basically five teams that all still have designs on playoff spots or automatic promotion, maybe in Sunderland's case, probably not. Good point for Hull City. For Luton, is it a good point to draw 0-0 at home to Middlesbrough? Well, yes, in one sense, but genuinely insane how this game played out. The first half, George, one of the most dominant first halves just in terms of shots, basically, that I've seen in the league this season. But Asgard in particular, but not just him, squandering chance after chance for Luton. And then Borough kind of getting a handle on things in the second half, able to stop the bleeding and the shots raining down on goal, and actually having a couple of forays of their own in the second half, a 0-0 draw, which, for the second half performance and for the way that they got the grip back on the game, you could argue that Borough deserved, but it genuinely could have been 3-4, 5-0 at half time, which is something that I often mock managers for saying as an exaggeration. With this, I genuinely believe it.
Yeah, a really, really strange. I mean, we've seen Luton do this a few times. I mean, their general performance level is really poor, and every so often we get flashes of what they're capable of. And in recent times, they've put in a couple of relatively average performances against Cardiff and Portsmouth to come away with all 3 points. But we've seen, in the first half against Sheffield United, for example, a game that they lost 1-0 for the most part against Argyle, in a game they drew 1-1. We've seen flashes of what they're capable of doing, but seemingly when Luton play well, it doesn't yield points and goals. They are adept at suddenly becoming a team that dominate between both boxes or between both goals, but are unable to put the ball in the back of the net, and that was the case here. They're running out of time now. I mean, the signs are quite clearly there that Luton are very much capable with this group of players of putting a run together of the like of Derby, but they've got to do it pretty soon. And to come up against a Middlesbrough side who are relatively strong and put in that kind of dominant first half display was impressive. They didn't back it up in the second half, really. They kind of regressed, as you'd expect, and they didn't finish their chances to get the points on the board. If we were sitting here and it was October or November and Luton in the relegation zone, they put in a performance like this, I'd be saying, yeah, look, we're about to see what Matt Bloomfield's all about, and we're going to see them turn the tide. But there's only 8 games to go now, and they've got a hell of a gap to bridge. More performances like that, they probably will be okay. But the fact that we've seen them do that in isolation quite a few times in the last couple of weeks, and then throw in worse performances within the same game, let alone in the next game, would have me still pretty concerned.
Portsmouth, what a horror week. I'm smiling only because this time last week we both waxed lyrical about various aspects of Portsmouth FC. Cut down went out of me saying lovely things, lots of shares, lots of views, happy days, lots of dark blue heart emojis. Everyone's happy. And it's been an absolute horror week since then. Losing at home to Argyle, and then losing away at Preston, George, by 2-1.
Yeah. I mean, it does feel like often teams who beat or who face Leeds just struggle. I don't know if there's the physical impact of facing up against a side with such intensity means you're unable to follow that up, especially with a midweek game coming shortly afterwards. But yeah, for Pompey, the dream game to follow up a win at home at Fratton Park against the league leaders was to host Plymouth Argyle, the worst away team, even worse than Luton in the league and probably the whole country. And to lose that seems to have really rocked the boat. There wasn't necessarily, this wasn't a shocking performance, and also it's important to remember that under Paul Heckingbottom, Preston are a very good side at Deepdale. They don't lose many games, and this was an awkward game for a Pompey side who themselves are not particularly good on their travels. But to get back in the game the way that they did, with Colby Bishop scoring from a corner, not long after Ryan Porteous had put Preston ahead of the back post. You've got to see the game out from there, and they didn't. The goal itself was really well taken by Threadson. It was one of those where initially it looked like he was kind of out of control, and then he became really in control. Like the touch around the keeper, the touch wide, and then just a brilliant left-footed finish from a tight angle. He did very well to keep his composure around his feet.
Love to see an angle of actually how much of the goal was open to him at the point where he hits that shot. And the fact that it's left foot shot, left side of the goal, and he's hitting it with with his side footing it as well. So the spin is naturally going to take it away from goal. And you often see if the ball bounces with that shot, he kind of spins away from goal. He got it absolutely perfectly. But it wasn't, actually it's 3 unbelievable touches because he controls the ball over the top from Brady at full stretch, at basically full speed while sprinting in behind. Then the next touch around the goalkeeper, a bouncing ball. That's why, as you say, it gives the impression that there's not a lot of control, that, it's all a bit bobbly and bouncy. But it's 3 incredible touches from Thordarson. Absolutely loved it. Difficulty level high. Not the goal that's going to win goal of the season, but it is going to get a big shout out on this pod.
For sure. A brilliant goal. And a goal that, Portsmouth felt after the Leeds game that they're probably safe. And as this championship relegation battle does to you, suddenly they're looking over their shoulders again and seeing all the teams beneath them winning. And even other teams, teams we just mentioned, even QPR, Swansea, teams that definitely looked out of it. They're suddenly thinking, do we need 4 or 5 more points? And is that an absolute guarantee that we'll get it?
Yeah, we're going to go deep diving next week on the Welcome to the Run-In analysis show. But for Preston, next fixture, Aston Villa at home in the FA Cup quarter-final. Come on, North End. Come on. Millwall 1, Stoke 0, 1 right at the death. A penalty scored brilliantly by Ivanovic. Should it have been given? It was basically given for holding in the box. Wilmot on Coburn. Coburn had wanted one earlier as well. I think it was Gibson that time. Just a lot of tussling and wrestling. It was that kind of game. And up until the 90-whatever minute, it wasn't being given. And then it was. This is one where, for me, it's definitely not nailed on. But I wouldn't say it's a disgrace either. There's lots. This is why I'm generally and seemingly more than most people sympathetic to referees. There's loads of instances where, as a neutral, therefore I don't have any particular emotional skin in the game, I genuinely am like, well, if he hadn't given that, I wouldn't have been angry. He did give that, and I'm still not angry. Like, I do just think there are certain decisions where that is the case. Anyway, it's damaging for Stoke. Ivanovic with a beautiful pen, by the way. Stoke had some chances in the second half. Bay had hit the bar. Jensen made a big save from Wouter Berger, flew off his line really well. I think Jensen's had a decent debut season in the Championship between the sticks for Millwall, been a good addition from them. I like seeing Championship teams, of Millwall's place in the food chain, going out and getting top League One performers. I think that's paid off for them when it comes to Jensen in goal. And as for Stoke, I mean, clearly it's a horrible result with Derby winning beneath them. Having got that win in midweek, 1-0 at home to Blackburn, things were looking a little rosier, but now just 1 point above the relegation zone. And if you look at their record since Mark Robbins was appointed on New Year's Day, the 21st best record in that time. Only Derby, Swansea and Luton have picked up fewer points. From a results perspective, it hasn't been a big impact. I think if you dig a little deeper into the underlying numbers, there has been some improvement from a performance point of view, particularly defensively, and the amount of chances and the quality of chances that they give up, but they still haven't developed a consistency, a rhythm. They haven't been able to put it together in the same game, right? When the defence has been poor, the attack hasn't been good enough. When the attack has been poor, the defence hasn't been good enough. And they've got to sort it out at some point. Just looking back at the playoff picture, George, we've touched on West Brom drawing at home to Hull, disappointing result. Borough still part of the conversation. They also drew with the bottom 8 side away at Luton. When we talk about Coventry re-establishing themselves after losing in midweek against Derby with a 3-0 home win against Sunderland, a game that we could see twice more this season.
Yeah. Coventry, after a midweek defeat that you'd have understood had it burst their bubble a little bit and bounced back with a roaring success. And it's interesting, Haji Wright coming back into being available again after his injury. It was always going to be interesting how Frank Lampard looked to integrate him back into the side. And it was interesting that initially in midweek, for his first start back, he played Ellis Sims through the middle and he played Haji Wright off the left, which is what we'd always seen under Mark Robbins. And Ephraim Mason-Clark, who's been magnificent since Lampard came in as a creator, as a goal scorer, but also just an unbelievably willing runner and someone who is an absolute nuisance down the left-hand side. And he was dropped to make way for Wright. And it didn't really work. And Sims was then subbed off and Wright went through the middle. And then here against Sunderland, Mason-Clark took up his position back on the left-hand side again and Wright played through the middle. And it worked. Wright is someone who is predominantly right-footed, and that means his ability to drift in off the left-hand side and use that right foot is so strong. But he's also like quite good with his left foot, as we saw here. And his direct running style and his ability to come off both flanks, as was seen by the first goal, hammered into the bottom right-hand corner, off that right-hand channel, with Mason Clark off the left, making the run that kind of brought about the space for him to do so. And as you say, with the cheapo, with the left foot for that third goal, off that left-hand side where I expect to see him play, the penalty that he won himself, driving at the defender off the right-hand side. Like, he's just too good for this level, I think. I know that he was the whipping boy at a time where Coventry was struggling early this season, and he was accused of lacking the attitude that Coventry fans wanted to see. But his quality and his physical attributes have never been in doubt. And it feels like him walking into a side that are already full of confidence, that are already playing so well, is a massive problem for everybody else involved in this championship playoff battle. And, you know, all season Sunderland have been a better side than Coventry, and yet they met on Saturday and there was no question who the dominant force were in that game. And that's why, you know, in the playoffs it matters just, you know, who ends the season best, who trends the best. And at the moment Coventry are exactly that. You know, were they to face up again in the playoffs, I'm pretty sure Sunderland would be desperate to avoid them after what we saw on Saturday.
Yeah, also Friday night, Bristol City beat Norwich 2-1 and moved into the top six for, 17 or 18 hours. This was a significant result just in the context of these two teams, in that had Norwich won, there'd have been only 2 points between them, but instead it's 8 points, and Norwich very much kissing goodbye to their playoff hopes, I think, at this point. Really nice finishing was the difference. You know, Sykes, I'm not sure I've ever seen him cut inside off the right flank and curl into the far corner with his left foot, but it's a hell of a string to be adding to his bow. String to add to the bow, to add to the quiver. And Nicky Wells, he's a good finisher. Hit one through the legs of the defender into the far corner. Yeah, there were some good saves from Max O'Leary in goal. I think most of them you'd expect him to save, but he still did it. Some very poor finishing from Norwich, both the shots on target, which mostly went at O'Leary, but also quite a few shots off the post and wide when well placed. That this was the highest non-penalty XG that any opposition team has created against Bristol City this season, home or away. So I'm loath to heavily criticise all of this Norwich City performance, but it's also nothing new that they do that and they don't win. That the personality of this team just needs improving over the summer, and I think that could happen, and I look forward to seeing it, because, as I've often said, this season in full flow, there aren't many teams that I enjoy watching more, but you know, the fans must feel constantly a little let down by the fact that they know the team can play well, they see the team play well in flashes, in chunks, for a half maybe, but so rarely for a full 90, and so often just tripping themselves up. Big win for Bristol City. There was an incredible interview by Ben Fisher of The Guardian with Liam Manning, in particular talking around the death of his son earlier this season. It's an unbelievably touching piece, beautifully put together by Ben and Liam Manning, incredibly open and amazingly so within it. So, you know, in terms of leave us football aside, in terms of a piece of writing or an interview about grief itself, I would absolutely recommend reading it. Incredibly touching, but also a nice quote, I thought, on the playoff push itself. And it kind of harks back to something I said the other day about Bristol City fans not seemingly able to truly believe in the playoff push, or maybe this is true, not wanting to believe in case they fall short again and they sort of get hurt again. But Manning said, the biggest bit is you want everyone to hope, to dream, to enjoy the ride for a little bit. It's probably the first time in a long, long time that the club has been in a position in March where it's possible. We're so fixated on outcomes and where we want to get to, you forget to live in the moment a little bit. It's like when you see people at music concerts with phones out. Put that away and enjoy the moment. I think I genuinely think he's hit the nail on the head of something that is an unfortunate part of modern football and how I perceive the kind of landscape around fandom in the EFL. As someone who's a neutral observer of 72 clubs, I'm constantly want to say to fans, like, can you enjoy this a bit more? Like, it's the same with us doing the England pod. It's like, can we enjoy this a little bit more? If this is meant to be the thing that we escape with, if this is meant to be the thing that we love more than anything else in the world, that line about being fixated on outcomes that you forget to live in the moment a little bit, I do think that, you know, that touched me, George. It touched my soul when it comes to modern football fandom.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's I think it's something that we can all basically agree on, and there's no denying that the narrative that comes out of pure outcome, rather than looking at kind of the wider picture of things, is something that dominates the way people look at and talk about the game. I think Liam Manning deserves immense credit for the way that he carries himself. He's obviously had, he's been to hell and back this season already. And, talking earlier in the show about great moments, talking as someone who may or may not have used snake emojis in reference to Liam Manning at some points over the last couple of years, given his Oxford connections. I'd absolutely love to see him take Bristol City to the Premier League this season, purely just from we saw it a couple of years ago when Darrell Clarke took Port Vale out of League Two, having suffered a similar tragedy himself. And at the end of the day, I think people who've had to go through stuff like that, having some kind of moment in the sun to have people appreciate their incredible work is a good thing. So, yeah, all credit to Liam.
Amen. That's the end of the Championship segment.